to hear from Scott Walmer again, seeing a lot of you. I think every board meeting we have, to talk about the history of capital allocations in the district and projections for the upcoming budget year. And the PowerPoint's in board docs if you want to look at it there or on your screen.
Members of the board, good evening. Yes, this is an information-only presentation on our current and our capital outlay situation going into the next budget year, 2013-14. So a little review about the nature of capital funding, a little bit about our bond program, our current budget, and lastly, the pieces of the governor's proposed budget that was recently put out that pertains to our capital funding. I'm going to skip ahead 2 slides and change the order a little bit. Just to review, this is what's funded with capital dollars. Curriculum materials is everything from adopted curriculum, library books, consumables, curriculum materials, kits, workbooks, all that kind of stuff. Technology, hardware, and software. Major building maintenance such as new air conditioners, carpets, painting, remodels. Also construction, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Those are funded by these sources. Unrestricted capital is traditional. It's been around a long time. It's a per student allocation. Along the way, it was divided and soft capital was created, which is exactly the same thing as unrestricted capital, except that it has to be used in the classroom, and districts do not have the option of moving those funds back and forth between M&O and capital. Unrestricted capital can, in the past, there probably were more districts in a position to take advantage of this, but capital outlay was actually moved to M&O because bonding was more prevalent in there, and capital overrides, and so there were districts in a situation where they didn't really need unrestricted capital. We'll show tonight that that's not our case, but that's why they were divided in half, I believe. But they're basically the same thing, only soft capital has to be used in the classroom. The School Facilities Board was created somewhere around 1999, maybe. It was to, 1, identify deficiencies in school buildings and bring them up to speed. Secondly, there was a building renewal fund that was to keep them up to state standards. And lastly, there was new construction, and any time a district's feet per student fell below a certain benchmark, a new school would be built. Excellencia is one of those schools, and it was in the first generation of schools that they built. Bond proceeds they were thought to be not needed anymore when the School Facilities Board came along and provided all of that, but it hasn't been funded in some time, and so districts are going back to bonds as Creighton has. Here's our capital allocation over the last number of years. So 06-07 was kind of the high water mark at around $4 million, and that included capital outlay, unrestricted capital, so to speak, soft capital, and some of that building renewal monies that we used to get but don't anymore. It bottomed out in 11-12. It was the main source of cuts for the state as they sought to balance their own budget, and a little bit was brought back for this year. Nothing close to traditional levels. So as we end this year, our carry forward, I'm expecting to be about $500,000 in unrestricted capital and $200,000 in soft capital. You saw that at one point we brought in about $4 million a year. During those years, we did build up a significant carry forward, and that's why we haven't had to take on more draconian cuts in that area in the last couple of years, also because of the bond program, which helps us replace air conditioners when they break down and things like that. So if it wasn't for the bond program, we would have very serious issues. Anyway, at the end of this year, we're looking at a rough estimate of about $700,000 left. This is our bond program. It funds all of our major maintenance, sidewalks, roofs, fences. Those proceeds will be substantially exhausted by the end of the year. We'll have a window between July and about the third week in August where we can issue more bonds, and we have a capacity because of the debt ceiling statute of about $7 million should the governor's legislation not go forward and raise that ceiling. So that would allow us to continue our major maintenance programs from bond, so that wouldn't impact the rest of our capital outlay situation. Should that legislation be enacted, that would raise our debt ceiling up to about $22 million, which coincidentally is the amount of authorization we have left. We could sell $22 million worth of bonds and build another school should that legislation pass this year. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move on. Any questions?
What bill number is that?
Say again?
What bill number?
I don't know. I don't know that it is a bill yet. It was just, it was in the executive recommendation. This is what we've traditionally bought with our capital budgets. This is capital outlay and curriculum and building renewal combined. Consumable reading and math materials, about $325,000 per year. Textbook adoptions, which we stopped doing annually in about 2006. We did use some Medicaid monies 2 years ago to fund a social studies adoption. But a district-wide adoption in one subject is between $800,000 and $1.2 million. Technology, as we rotate through obsolete equipment, is about $400,000 a year. Our software renewals, educational and non-educational, $650,000. And we did enter into a lease-to-own sort of copier agreement, and the annual payment for that is $70,000. Maintenance, $300,000. That's a range of tools and fixtures, an occasional vehicle. So the tools are vacuum cleaners, things for the custodians, things for the maintenance folks to do their projects. The schools get $125,000 total to replace textbooks and buy supplemental materials. We set aside $120,000 for band instruments and new section materials as we phase in at Biltmore, and as our student count might increase, to outfit new classrooms for education. Building renewal is all done with the bond program, so should that ever expire, that would seriously exacerbate our situation. And furniture, we really aren't buying a whole lot of that. So to conclude, with the $700,000 carry forward and an allocation of $1.1 million, if we add up all the needs on that page, which included the textbook adoption, that comes to almost $3 million. So without an adoption, we probably have one more year to continue with the status quo, and after that we'll have some difficult decisions to make. Governor's budget. To keep in mind that that's only a recommendation, but it is indicative that you are not hearing legislators remark negatively about it. None of them said really negative things when it came out. That's probably an indication that a good chunk of it will pass, or part of it. Too early to know. As the Common Core gets implemented, the budget, the governor has in her budget some one-time monies for teacher training and materials to help get that implemented. Also some technology. Her budget includes a technology needs assessment. This would be just like building renewal, only for technology, to get all schools up to a standard, for example, 5 students per computer. An education, learning, and accountability system that would combine a whole bunch of departments now. The current SACE a student longitudinal data system, an instructional improvement system, and an internal department data system. I'm not sure what all those are, but all that would be included under this umbrella.
And in terms of the particulars, is this the same money that the Department of Ed is looking for, or are they looking to fund something different? Because I know the superintendent and the CIO are talking often about this system, and wondering if they're talking about the same system.
I think it is the same system, only this might be a little bit more.
More of it,
A
okay.
bigger system, yeah. He had asked for 35 million last year and got 3.
Yeah.
So it was enough just to get started, but SACE still doesn't do most of the things that it was invented to do, and that was 15 years ago. So I don't know how far off this is, but I would imagine it's a way. Even if this all gets enacted, it will still be a while. The governor does include in her budget a restoration of the bonding capacity as it was before the school facilities board. So that would basically double the allowable percentage. Now at the same time, our secondary assessed valuation has fallen, but if you do the math, it does come out to right about how much bonding authority we still have. Remember, we had a $44 million authority. We've issued $22 million. We have $22 million left that we could issue at our pleasure if that capacity is restored.
I have a question,
Mhm.
and Hilda, you can tell me if this is germane or not. In terms of going out for a bond or a capital override, that has to be in the November election cycle, is that correct?
Yeah.
And that can happen in 2013, 2014, any year, just as long as it's in November?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So usually the period to declare for such a thing is around June. So I imagine we'll have further discussions about that. Building renewal, which hasn't been funded for a number of years. The governor now wants to do that in a sort of grant method. So you have a project you want to do at one of your schools, and you write up for this grant. I'm told that this program's already in existence. It just doesn't have a lot of money. But currently, you can't be reimbursed. It has to be in advance. So if your air conditioner bottoms out, it's not going to help you because you have to go ahead and replace that. And so it's only the kind of projects that you can think about and plan for. So I suppose you could write a grant for, I have 7 HVACs that are at the end of their supposed useful life, and do it that way, but there's no reimbursement.
You said that there is a program like that already, but there's not a lot of money in it. Is she planning on putting more money in it, or?
Yeah, there's a dollar figure in her budget that I don't have at my fingertips, but she does specifically mention an amount of money.
Is it new money or is it
Yes.
being moved from?
That's a good question. It's new money in this particular case. And a school maintenance accountability program. So you would log on to their website and list the preventative maintenance tasks that you've done. I mean, her description's fairly global, but that's the gist of it, so they can monitor. I imagine if they're going to allow grants to fix up your buildings, they want to know also that you've done all the maintenance you're supposed to do.
I'm wondering if those are going to be privately funded.
They're grants.
Well, the school maintenance accountability program, would that be something at the state that?
Well, that wouldn't cost them much. That would be the district swearing
Oh,
that
the
they
district
did
saying, okay.
all the maintenance they're supposed to do. That's less a help and more an accountability
Okay.
piece and increase.
Or the commission that looks at all this money for the grants?
Yeah,
Hopefully that's to-
I imagine that would be supportive documentation as you request your grant monies. Yeah. that's it. Anything further?
Thanks for the bad news.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you.
Next is the legislative and political report.